Hello, everyone, and hope you're doing well. So, again, we continue our talk concerning making effective lesson plans. And here we are in the fourth part, and we are going to talk about sequence map and why it's so important that you should not skip this step. We said that we are going to start from theory and move to practice. And now, here we are about to talk about the practical part. So, we started first by talking about the first cross-curricular competencies and why we said what do we mean by them and why we should include them, although the talk about them may seem trivial, but they are very important there. We talked about the idea of the sequence and how the sequence means that we are talking about a project. And of course, we talked about the idea of objective and what do we mean by objective and what are valid objectives. Now, the question that we have in our mind, so where do we get these objectives from? In this case, here I'm going to just give you an example. And in this example here, we see, I think it's from third year secondary school. I'm not sure, but I just want to make it as an example for you. And I want to stress the idea because some teachers, they tell me, okay, what about primary school? What about middle school? Or about secondary school? Actually, they are all the same. The way you're supposed to teach is all the same. We all follow competency-based approach, project-based approach. It's at the heart of the curriculum. So when we start, you can see that here, for example, this document is from the syllabus. That's why you should, as a teacher, in fact, you have to find the syllabus and you check it. Everything in the syllabus must be respected, of course, unless there are some changes. For example, maybe something omitted or something added. You should know what you have in the curriculum. For example, in this document, we find, students will be able to do what? Identify five major ancient civilization in this case, speak or talk about the rise and fall of civilization. So these are usually what we call kind of communicative objectives. So these are like they are part of the project, which is making a profile of an ancient civilization. So you can't skip these. And often these you are supposed to teach them whether in lessons like read and write and listen and speak, where you introduce your student to new situations. You find also what you call grammar, the resources or the language structure, for example, past simple, past perfect, used to, and had to. So all these are also part of of course, you find them linked to the idea of the themes that you want to talk about. Now, since you know the objective, and you should have a very thorough view about on all the objectives. Now, once you have this, you're supposed to decide on what to teach exactly. It's not what to teach, and how to teach these objectives. You have to decide on the number of sessions that you have and the map that's going to help you. For example, because not all the time, for example, you have fixed lesson number of lessons. I'm just going to give you an example. If I am teaching and I'm going to calculate the time that I have, then I find that I have 3 weeks. And in 3 weeks, for example, I have 6 sessions. And in these 6 sessions, I have to teach all these objectives. So I have to devise a plan in order to make these lessons into these sessions. And it's very important that from the first session, I know what I'm going to teach, even in the last session. And I'll tell you why it's so important. In this case, what are you going to do? You are going to divide your plans into lessons. Let's say, for example, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. Even let's say, for example, I have 6 lessons. When you start teaching, for example, first lesson, usually we start, even we'll talk about the initial situation, but often you are going to start talking about the team. In this case, for example, you start with listen and speak, a lesson that is going to be emphasized on the idea of listening, and your learners are going to speak about a certain topic. Now, even we are in the first session. Let's say, for example, I'm going to talk about civilization. I'm talking about civilization, but inside that lesson, I'm also referring to language structure, like, for example, the past simple, or like as we have seen, for example, we go back again, like the use of used to or had to, because I'm talking about the past simple. So even now, at this stage, I'm designing a lesson about, let's say, just to identify, let's say, for example, talking about the fall of civilization. there implicitly there is the talk about language structure. And this is very, very important to really to pay attention to, because when you move, for example, to let's say, for example, PDP, I will come to it. Let's say, for example, the second lesson, I'm going to talk about read and write. So the second lesson, I'm going to talk about this idea. Let's say, for example, to talk about the growth of man or civilization. So we did the first one in listen and speak. We are going to do the second one in read and write. Now, when it comes to the third lesson, grammar lesson, or you call it practice, or whatever you want to call it, you are going to find it so easy, because even in the lesson 1 and lesson 2, in fact, you have injected the structure, the language structure, into your lesson. So when it comes to the grammar session or that session, you're not going just to bring examples, new examples. In fact, if you have designed your lesson very well, you are going to bring examples from lesson 1 and lesson 2. And by this, you are even enforcing the vocabulary, the idea that you have taught in the first lesson and the second lesson. If you don't do this, maybe at the end, or when you want to teach grammar, because we say grammar PPU, that's usually we have what it's called presentation, practice, and use. You are going to bring in new examples, and you may say that famous word, I wish I had talked about it in the first lesson. But if you have this lesson in mind, you won't have any problem. In fact, here you can say that the presentation and the presentation is in fact has been done in the first lesson and the second lesson. Let's say, for example, we are talking about primary school. If I want to teach, let's say, for example, presentation, you present yourself, or you introduce yourself. Even at this level, for example, if it's read and write, say, for example, I am and he is and she is. You can, for example, implicitly indicate that there is a difference between I am and he is just by different colors. Although you are not going to tell your pupils or your learners about them, but just you kind of indicate that there is something there. And in the third lesson, when you want to talk about grammar, you just bring the lesson, the examples from lesson 1 and lesson 2. And by this, you can say that your way of teaching grammar is in fact according to a context. And context was also relevant to the overall theme of the sequence. That's why I say designing sequence map is very, very important. You find that all the lessons are related, and you have kind of one unit, although there is a division of lessons, but it's one only unit. That's why some teachers, they say, for example, some inspectors or some mentors, if I can say that, they tell you don't think about it as one lesson, but it's just one connected course. And of course, we have this lesson as the integration lesson. I'm going to talk about it also later, when you integrate everything that they have read and into making the sequence. And of course, you can even add add another lesson of presentation. So it all depends on you. My idea here is that I want to tell you that when you have a map in your mind, that conceptual map of what you are going to do in a whole sequence, trust me, you won't find any problem, because everything is connected. It's not one lesson, then the second lesson, your students forget everything. No, it's kind of everything connected. I'm going just to give you a small example here. I'm going to end the video. I used to make, for example, one sequence. I used to make one connected situation. For example, if I talk about one person in listening, I continue to talk about him in read and write, maybe different story, then talking about him. So it's kind of connected. It's like making one person. The same thing, for example, let's say, for example, we talked here about rise and fall, just an example. You create one context, one big context. Your learners are going to stay always concentrated with you. I hope this can help you. I'm going to add another video explaining this, maybe in Arabic, not in English. And I really hope you benefited from this. If you have any problems, please you feel free to comment or and ask. Inshallah, I will be able to answer you. So please subscribe and follow our page. So thank you so much. Goodbye.